All right, welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I step off the train and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon, listeners. It's a lovely day here in suburban Chicago. I've stepped off the train and I'm walking home. It feels like it should be late August, not late September. Well, maybe it's a little cooler than you'd expect in late August, but it could be late May or early June afternoon. It's got to be in the mid 70s, if not warmer, which is a little warm for late September. Not unheard of, but a little surprising. Still, it's very nice weather and I'm glad to be out in it. Well, like I said, I've been a bit behind in recording my episodes, so that means I have plenty to talk to you about. So I thought I would talk to you about some games I played recently. That's right, it's time for Board Game Espresso Triple Shot. For those of you new to the podcast, Board Game Espresso Triple Shot is an episode style where I talk about games that I've played recently for the first time. It's not a review segment because I haven't played these games long enough to give them a reasonable review. Instead, I consider it kind of a first look. So I wasn't really intending to do a themed episode, but it seems like just by happenstance, the next 3 games on my list are all games that I played for the first time at Gen Con. So this is kind of the Gen Con 2024 Board Game Espresso Triple Shot. Now, I did talk about Burn the Fort in the last episode, and Burn the Fort is a game I played for the first time at Gen Con. So this isn't exclusively or conclusively all the games I played at Gen Con. It's just a smattering thereof. Nonetheless, so the first game I want to talk about is AQUA, Biodiversity in the Oceans. This is designed by Dan and Tristan Halstead. Dan Halstead was one of the hosts of the Podcast of Nonsensical Gamers, from whom I got the phrase top of the stack and the general idea of it. I got to meet Dan, as I've mentioned before, at Origins 2017, where he showed me Barron Park, and that was really fun. So, well, congratulations, Dan, on another publication. Previously, I've played Dan's game Bees, and it seems like Dan's focus, or his bailiwick, are sort of light abstract games. Games where you're trying to sort of maximize your score within a relatively simple rule set. And in that regard, I think he does a pretty good job. I can't say what Tristan added to this, but I believe that Dan and Tristan are a design duo now, Tristan being Dan's son, as I understand it. AQUA Biodiversity in the Oceans is an abstract tile layer in which you are trying to complete different patterns in order to score points. Think about like the patterns in Calico, where you get a certain pattern on the quilt, and then you get to put a cat on it. And then in a related way, then there are bigger patterns that you can achieve once you've achieved the smaller patterns. The game has a variety of different patterns that you're trying to get, and those change game to game. So if you think about the way that Cascadia has changing scoring options, or frankly Calico, I think AQUA fits into those realms. AQUA has a really interesting art style. It uses these hexagons that are divided up into 3 pieces, and each piece has a sort of different pattern on it. And so when you're putting the hexagons together, they are connecting with other hexagons to make these little diamonds of a particular color. And you're trying to connect those different diamonds across a variety of different color sets. Sort of stringing those together will give you your scoring condition. It's an interesting mechanism. It feels very much abstract tile layer in the neighborhood of those other games I've mentioned. We did find some elements of it a little confusing. There was one rule that basically you're not allowed to play tiles in a certain way because it creates like an unscorable area, and that part felt a little clunky to us in the one play we had. Overall, it was a fine game, and I certainly would enjoy playing it again from other folks. I wouldn't say it was a home run for me. I didn't buy it. I think, just the shortcomings in terms of the theme felt really abstracted. I mean, there is excellent art. It's Vincent Dutrait art. The drawings of the sea animals were really great, but they didn't feel necessarily, it could easily have been about some completely different theme or setting, and it would have worked just as well. So from that perspective, it didn't really grab my attention. And then it just wasn't different enough from the other games in that genre. Nonetheless, if you like pattern matching tile layer, it's definitely worth taking a look at. And I seem to be in the minority here. This has a 7.4 on Board Game Geek, so it's certainly getting a fair amount of accolades from the BGG users. So check out AQUA, Biodiversity in the Oceans, if you get a chance. Next up, we have the ART project, the A.R.T. project, from designers Florian Sirieux and Benoit Turpin. Benoit Turpin being the designer of Welcome to Your Perfect Home, or Welcome to Las Vegas, or Welcome to the Moon. Art by Vincent Dutray, and published by Lumberjacks Studio and the Op Games in the US, which is also who published AQUA. This game I got to learn from Sam Healy, formerly of the Dice Tower, so it was sort of fun to see him in person. I will say I wish he had let us figure the game out a little bit more. He was offering more advice than I necessarily needed or wanted. I generally think if you're teaching somebody a game, you can kind of wait and see how much advice they want. So whatever, minor gripe. The ART project, as it's called, is a sort of 60s themed spy game in which it's a co-op game in which you are a group of sort of mod era spies trying to protect the world's art from being stolen. There are a series of sort of criminals in stylish look who are seeding the board, and you're trying to tackle them using a variety of different resources. The gameplay feel is certainly in the pandemic neighborhood in terms of the game has these escalating problems that emerge, and the players need to work together to spend their limited resources both to stop the escalating problems, but also to embark on the win condition. And those things are kind of mutually exclusive. Stopping the problems keeps the game from being over, but you don't get close to the win condition, and then you're closer to losing because you run out of time. This was a fine game. If I weren't already ensconced in plenty of co-op games, I think the ART project would be a nice start to that journey. Vincent Dutray's art is really fun. But again, like the AQUA, just not a lot there for me in terms of something special or unique, something that would make me want to get this over just getting out one of the co-ops that I already have, particularly the more difficult or interesting ones. Ghost Stories still stands near the top. I still really like Atlantis Rising, Spirit Island, and Aeon's End are all sort of more compelling to me than the ART project. Pandemic 2, to be honest. So again, a pass for me in terms of purchasing. Probably worth trying, especially if you really like control the chaos cooperative games. And the 60s mod theme is pretty neat. The Vincent Dutray art is excellent. It sort of reminded me, it's in the vein more of his stuff like Tenpenny Parks, rather than the older art he used to do for Lookout games, stuff like Caverna. It's that sort of new, rugged look. Really good stuff, but the game was just okay. So that's the ART project. The third game that I got to try at Gen Con was Ziggurat. Ziggurat is a family-friendly legacy game by Rob Daviau and Matt Leacock, the pair who made Pandemic Legacy, and Rob Daviau, obviously the king of legacy games and designer of a lot of different things. Matt Leacock, probably best known for Pandemic, as well as the Forbidden series, Forbidden Island, Forbidden Desert, Forbidden Sky, and Forbidden Jungle. So those two teamed up again to make a legacy game, and this one is called Ziggurat. It's got a really nice looking 3D component. It is a ziggurat, I know you're surprised about that you build on the table, and it's got little spots for stickers and little doors you can open. And like I said, it's a family-friendly game, so the gameplay mechanisms are relatively accessible at first. In terms of level, I'm reminded of like Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. The first the first chapter of that game, which was not a legacy game, but was a campaign, was very, very accessible for gamers of any kind of moderate stripe. Like if you have kids who've played any sorts of games, they can handle the first chapter of Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle once they're 7 or 8 probably. And Ziggurat I would put in the same category. Probably a 7 or 8 year old would be able to handle the mechanisms pretty well, could collaborate as a team on winning. We did win the first chapter. And then there are story elements and boxes you get to open up and stickers you get to apply. One of the things I really like about the way they've packaged this game is that it comes with a reset pack in the game. So you can play all the way through, finish it up, and then there's a reset pack in the bottom of the box that allows you to reset it all the way back to the beginning, so you could do another run through the campaign, or you could give it to a friend or whatever. In terms of gameplay itself, there's an interesting issue when you are looking at something being family friendly, because often there is a trade-off, right? If you're making a game that is accessible and easily understood by, say, a 7-year-old, the level at which it can still be really satisfying for an adult has to drop. It's a concession you have to make. And so it feels a little unfair to judge this game as a game I might play as an adult with other adults when it's meant to be a family game. So putting on my memory cap or thinking about when my kids were, say, 7 or 8, I think Ziggurat would have been a really fun game to play with them over the course of 6 months, playing. I think there's 8 or 12 games in the campaign. So playing that over a couple months, once a week or something, would have been pretty fun. Now the game played pretty fast, so I feel like if your kids have any kind of attention span at all, you're maybe playing 2 sessions in one sitting, 2 games in one sitting. But even then, you still got 6 weeks, maybe 2 months of play. And from that perspective, the game is pretty neat. The mechanisms are interesting, not incomprehensible, but also somewhat novel. And the table presence is a real winner. The game is very beige, however, so that is one thing to worry about. But overall, an interesting game. I definitely would be in the market for it if I had a middle grade elementary schooler. So like a 2nd, 3rd grade or something like that. Feels like it would be a good fit. So finally, I always like to talk about one game that I dusted off as well. It's been 5 years, 1 month, and 27 days since I played Power Grid, or when I dusted it off, it had been that long. Power Grid is a classic game from Freedom and Freeze, published by Rio Grande in the United States, and it is a sort of classic economic game about building a network, trying to be as efficient as you can in using your money, and trying to power the most cities. It is the sort of game that appeals to me. I certainly enjoy playing it, but it is not a favorite, and my wife really dislikes it. Although last time we played, she won. She didn't really want to play, but some of the other people we're playing with said we should. So she's like, yeah, okay, fine, we can play it. And then she won, which I thought was really funny, in a tiebreaker by $2. So an especially spiteful win, which is always the best kind. Power Grid, it's always satisfying. It's an interesting game. Often when I'm playing it, I would just wish I was playing brass instead. But overall, a really solid game and worth checking out. I was surprised it had been 5 years since I played, but there it was. So probably won't play it again for another 5 years, but when I do, I'm sure I'll say the same thing. Well, that's about it for me today. Thanks for joining me on my walk. Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and post about what you've been playing. I'd love to see it. Or send me a message there. Wombat929 is my username. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.